I am Simone, 33 years old, and somehow still recovering from the trauma inflicted by my family. As an independent filmmaker, I escaped their toxicity but still keep in touch. Last Friday, I ran into a luxury hotel lobby to hand them VIP tickets to my master's graduation. My mother leaned forward, smirking. Simone, your little art degree happens every year, but your sister needs a vacation, so we are going to the Maldives. Pity works wonders. I took my tickets and smiled. That night, I logged into the university portal, reassigned their front row seats to the people who actually loved me, and emailed the network executives to finalize my $700,000 broadcasting contract. Before continuing this story, let me know where you started reading in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you have ever faced family members who underestimated your worth. Growing up in Atlanta meant being privileged to outsiders. But inside our sprawling estate, emotional coldness permeated every single corner. Our massive home was a fortress of expectations I could never meet. My parents, Marcus and Helena, were obsessed with the concept of Black excellence. To them, success was strictly measured by country club memberships, luxury vehicles, and prestigious job titles. My sister Jasmine fit perfectly, a socialite chasing internet fame. She eventually married Brad, a white finance executive from old money. My parents worshipped Brad. His presence was their ultimate status symbol. I had no interest in their world. I wanted to hold a camera and document the raw truth of our communities. Choosing art over corporate law made me the family embarrassment. Every holiday was a masterclass in insults. They cut me off financially, forcing me to work 3 jobs. Despite everything, I still craved their approval. I thought earning my master's degree would make them proud. I received 4 VIP tickets for the ceremony. I wanted my parents' sister and brother-in-law to sit in the front row and watch me. Last Friday, I drove to the Ritz-Carlton where they were having lunch. I hurried through the doors, clutching the tickets. I spotted them near the valet stand, surrounded by Louis Vuitton luggage. "Mom, Dad," I called out. "I have something for you." Helena turned around, her expression freezing into annoyance. "Simone, what are you doing here?" she asked, looking me up and down. I wore plain jeans, a stark contrast to their expensive resort wear. I held out the envelopes. "I brought your VIP tickets for my graduation tomorrow. I got you the best seats in the main auditorium." My father, Marcus, did not even look at the tickets. He checked his gold watch. "Simone, your mother already told you we have other plans this weekend." I frowned. "What other plans?" "This is my master's graduation. I have been working toward this for 3 years." Jasmine rolled her eyes. "Do not be so dramatic, Simone. Brad just closed a massive commercial real estate deal. We are exhausted from all the corporate parties, so Mom and Dad are treating us to a baby moon in the Maldives. Our flight leaves in 3 hours." I looked at my mother, desperate. "You are skipping my graduation for a vacation." Helena swatted my hand away. "Simone, we are celebrating real success. Brad is securing our family's financial legacy. Your little art degree is cute, but it happens every single year. You can just mail us a picture holding your paper. Black excellence means showing up for the things that actually matter. Do not make a scene in front of Brad." I felt the familiar sting of rejection burning in my throat, but I refused to let the tears fall. Before I could formulate a response, Brad stepped forward. He had that arrogant, condescending smirk he always wore when dealing with me. He reached into the pocket of his custom linen suit, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and dropped it right on top of my graduation tickets. "Here you go, Simone." Brad said, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. "Buy yourself a nice coffee to celebrate, and do me a favor, order an Uber back to wherever you live. My private driver is pulling up and his luxury SUV definitely does not have room for you or your cheap camera bags." Jasmine giggled, leaning into his arm. "You are so generous, babe. Let us go, the champagne is waiting." My parents did not say a word to defend me. Marcus simply nodded at Brad, completely subservient to his wealthy white son-in-law, while Helena turned her back on me to direct the bellboys handling their luggage. They walked out the glass doors, laughing together, a picture-perfect family that had just casually discarded its black sheep. I stood alone in the center of the opulent lobby, the golden tickets crumpled in my grip, the bill resting mockingly on top. The humiliation was designed to break me, to put me in my place. But they were wrong. I did not cry. I did not shout. I picked up the $100 bill, walked to the nearest bellboy, and handed it to him as a tip. Just as I turned toward the exit, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was an urgent email from the head of Vanguard Studios, the largest streaming network in the country. The subject line read, "Contract finalized." I opened the message. The text was brief, but world-shattering. "Simone, our executive team has reviewed the final cut of your documentary. We are absolutely blown away. We will be attending your graduation tomorrow to formally announce our acquisition of your film for $700,000. Please make sure your family is in the front row for the television broadcast." I stared at the screen, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. They wanted my family in the front row, and I knew exactly who my real family was. The adrenaline from the Vanguard email pulsed through my veins as I left the Ritz-Carlton lobby. The glass doors slid shut, severing the tie to my parents and their toxic spectacle. A $700,000 acquisition meant my life was about to change. I needed to get back to my apartment, steam my graduation gown, and prepare for the most important day of my professional career. I drove my Honda Civic across town toward my studio apartment. It was a small space in a building that had seen better days, but it was mine. I had spent countless sleepless nights in that room, editing footage on a refurbished laptop, surviving on cheap noodles and sheer willpower. I pulled into the parking lot, grabbed my camera bag, and climbed the 3 flights of concrete stairs. When I reached my door, I slid the familiar brass key into the deadbolt, but it would not turn. I pulled the key out and looked closely. It was completely new. The tarnished brass fixture had been replaced with shiny silver metal. Before I could process what I was seeing, I heard footsteps echoing down the hallway. Mr. Henderson, the building manager, approached me with a manila folder in his hands. He was an older man who usually greeted me with a warm smile. But today he could not meet my eyes. He stopped a few feet away, shifting uncomfortably. "Simone, I am so sorry," Mr. Henderson muttered, extending the folder. "The property management company sent a locksmith over an hour ago. They ordered an immediate vacancy." I stared at him, my heart hammering. "Mr. Henderson, my rent is paid through the end of the month. I have never missed a single payment. You cannot just lock me out without notice." He let out a heavy sigh. "I know you are a good tenant, Simone, but the building was acquired by a new management firm last year. The ownership group belongs to your brother-in-law. His office sent down the directive this morning. They invoked a family ownership loophole in your lease agreement. They ordered us to secure the premises and repossess the unit." The words hit me like a physical blow. Brad, the same man who had just dropped a $100 bill at my feet, had quietly orchestrated my eviction while I was driving across town. I snatched the folder from Mr. Henderson and opened it. Inside was the eviction notice, printed on the heavy letterhead of Brad's real estate firm. But what made my blood run cold was the signature at the bottom. It was not just Brad who had signed off on this. There were 2 other signatures on the guarantor line, Marcus and Helena Vance. My parents had legally authorized my eviction. My phone buzzed. It was the family group chat. I opened the message, my hands trembling. Helena had sent a long text, completely unbothered by what she had just done. "Simone, I assume you have been locked out by now," her message read. "Brad realized your apartment was sitting on a highly profitable commercial lot and he needed to liquidate the unit immediately. Since we co-signed that lease, we agreed to terminate it. We also authorized the management company to seize your security deposit and prepaid rent. Brad needed the liquid cash to upgrade Jasmine to the exclusive overwater bungalow in the Maldives. A true artist struggles, Simone. You should be thanking us. Grow up." I read the words, trying to comprehend the sheer malice. They had literally taken the roof over my head and the money from my bank account to pay for a luxury vacation upgrade. I was officially homeless, standing in a hallway with nothing but my camera bag 24 hours before I was supposed to receive my master's degree. A new notification popped up. Jasmine had just posted a video on social media. I clicked it, numb to the cruelty. The video showed Jasmine sitting in the plush leather seats of the International First Class Lounge. She held a flute of champagne, laughing at the camera. "Friendly reminder to always secure the bag, ladies," Jasmine said, her voice dripping with entitlement. "Some lazy siblings are still renting cheap apartments and calling it independence. Meanwhile, my husband just surprised me with the ultimate baby moon." She raised her wrist to the camera, showing off a bright diamond tennis bracelet. "This is what real wealth looks like. Leave the struggling artist phase behind." I closed the application. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone. The anger inside me had bypassed explosive rage and settled into a deep glacial calm. Mr. Henderson handed me a single key. "They gave me exactly 1 hour to let you pack," he said quietly. "I am so sorry." "Do not apologize, Mr. Henderson. They will get exactly what they deserve," I replied, my voice perfectly steady. I took the silver key, unlocked the heavy wooden door, and walked inside. I moved with mechanical precision. I did not pack memories. I packed survival. I loaded my hard drives, expensive camera equipment, work clothes, and my black graduation gown into boxes. I hauled everything down the flights of stairs and shoved it into the trunk of my beat-up Honda Civic. I sat in the driver's seat looking at the worn steering wheel. I had no money, no physical home, and a biological family that wanted to see me broken. But I had a $700,000 secret and a master's graduation ceremony tomorrow. I started the sputtering engine, turned the heat on, and drove away from the glittering skyscrapers of Midtown Atlanta. I navigated through the working-class neighborhoods of the South Side until I pulled up to a small house with a faded front porch. I grabbed my heavy graduation gown, walked slowly up the concrete steps, and knocked on the peeling wooden door of the only people who had ever truly believed in my dreams. The heavy wooden door swung inward before my knuckles could strike the peeling paint a second time. Mr. David stood in the frame wearing his faded mechanic uniform, his face instantly breaking into a wide and genuine smile. Behind him, Mrs. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her flour-covered hands on a yellow floral apron. They did not ask why I was standing on their porch with a cardboard box and a graduation gown. They simply stepped aside and ushered me into the warmth of their home. Keisha, my best friend, was currently deployed overseas, but her parents had always treated me like their second daughter. Mrs. Sarah took the heavy box from my hands and immediately directed me toward the small guest bedroom at the end of the hallway. It was a modest space, but the sheets smelled like lavender, and the room radiated a genuine comfort my parents' mansion completely lacked. "Put your things down, Simone," Mrs. Sarah said, her voice rich with maternal warmth. "Dinner is almost ready. Come eat before your food gets cold." I sat at their worn wooden kitchen table, surrounded by framed photographs of smiling family members. There was no pretense here, no performing for high society. Mr. David served generous plates of smothered chicken and collard greens. We ate and talked about my graduation tomorrow. For a brief moment, the sting of my eviction faded, but then my eyes caught sight of a bright red envelope sitting on the edge of the kitchen counter. The bold letters across the front read, "Final notice, Mr." David noticed my gaze. He quickly reached over, snatched the envelope, and shoved it into his pocket with a dismissive wave. "Just some junk mail," Mr. David said, forcing a chuckle. "You know how these banks try to sell you credit cards you do not need." I set my fork down, the food suddenly turning to ash in my mouth. I knew exactly what that envelope was. The red lettering was identical to the foreclosure warnings my documentary subjects received. The glacial calm I had maintained all day suddenly shattered, replaced by a suffocating wave of guilt. "Mr. David, please do not lie to me," I said, my voice trembling. "I know that is a late payment notice for your mortgage. You are falling behind because of me." Mrs. Sarah looked down at her plate, the silence in the kitchen growing heavy. I pushed my chair back, the anger bubbling up as I remembered the agonizing conversation with my biological parents exactly 1 year ago. I had stood in their immaculate living room begging for a $50,000 loan to finish the post-production on my film. Marcus had laughed in my face while Helena swirled her wine. "We are not funding a project about impoverished neighborhoods, Simone," Helena had said. "That ghetto trash makes our family look bad. Come back when you want to open a law firm." They had millions sitting in offshore accounts, but they refused to help their own daughter. I had left their house crushed, ready to abandon my dream. But David and Sarah had found me crying in my car. They did not have millions. They had a modest retirement fund and the equity in their small home. Without hesitation, they secretly took out a second mortgage to hand me a cashier's check for $50,000. They risked their entire financial security on a girl who did not even share their blood. "Simone, you listen to me," Mr. David said firmly, pulling me back to the present. "We believe in your vision. We believe in the stories you are telling. Money comes and goes, but your talent is rare. We will figure the bank out. Do not you worry about our roof when you just lost yours." Tears finally spilled down my cheeks. My biological parents had evicted me to fund a luxury vacation for their golden child, while these two beautiful people were risking homelessness just to see me succeed. I wiped my face and stood up from the table. I grabbed my laptop from my camera bag and flipped it open on the kitchen counter. "What are you doing, sweetie?" Mrs. Sarah asked, standing up beside me. "I am fixing a massive mistake," I replied. I logged into the university's graduation portal. The screen loaded, displaying my allotted VIP guest list for tomorrow's ceremony. The names: Marcus Vance, Helena Vance, Jasmine Vance, and Brad Miller stared back at me. They were the people I had desperately tried to impress for 33 years. I highlighted Brad's name first and hit delete. I felt a small surge of power. Next went Jasmine, then Helena. Finally, I deleted Marcus. The digital slate was wiped completely clean. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I typed in the new names: David Williams, Sarah Williams. I hit the submit button. The system locked in the changes, generating 2 digital boarding passes for the absolute best seats in the main auditorium. I turned the laptop around to face them. "Tomorrow, the biggest streaming network in the country is coming to my graduation," I said, looking directly into their shocked eyes. "They are acquiring my film. My success is going to be broadcast live, and I need my real parents sitting in the front row to watch it happen." Mrs. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hands, while Mr. David stared at the screen in absolute disbelief. Before they could say a word, a loud ping echoed from my laptop. I pulled the device back and checked the notification. It was not a message from the university. It was an email from a highly secured encrypted server. The sender's address was a random string of numbers and letters, completely anonymous. I clicked the secure message, frowning. There was no signature, only one file, and the subject line read, "Look at what your white brother-in-law is really doing to our people." My finger hovered over the trackpad. I glanced over at Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah, who were still staring at the updated graduation guest list, unaware of the digital bomb sitting in my inbox. I excused myself, thanking them for the meal, and carried my heavy laptop into the small guest bedroom. The wooden door clicked shut behind me, sealing me inside quiet, safe space. I sat on the edge of the floral mattress and double-clicked the mysterious attachment. A massive zip file began to download, immediately unzipping into dozens of perfectly organized folders. I opened the very first document. It was a recorded ledger from Brad's commercial real estate investment firm, the exact same firm that my parents proudly bragged about at every single country club dinner in Atlanta. The glowing laptop screen illuminated the dark room as the hours slipped by in absolute silence. Midnight turned into 1 in the morning, then 2, and finally 3. I read through every single scanned document, scoured the highly confidential internal emails, and listened closely to 3 separate audio recordings attached to the bottom of the main folder. What I found made me physically sick to my stomach. Brad was not a brilliant financial mind or a legitimate businessman. He was a ruthless predator. His massive real estate deals were nothing more than an elaborate illegal Ponzi scheme. He was specifically targeting elderly Black homeowners in historically rich neighborhoods of Atlanta. The documents detailed exactly how he operated his malicious business. Brad and his corrupt associates would offer these vulnerable seniors predatory refinancing loans, intentionally burying complex, ruinous clauses deep within the paperwork. When the unsuspecting victims inevitably defaulted on the astronomical hidden interest rates, Brad's firm legally seized their deeds. He was ruthlessly stealing generational wealth from our community, flipping the stolen homes, and funneling the massive profits through a complex series of offshore shell companies. And the absolute worst part was hiding in plain sight within the daily expense reports. I opened a spreadsheet labeled Personal Distributions. There, highlighted in harsh green rows, were the exact monetary transfers funding my family's opulent lifestyle. The $200,000 deposit for Jasmine's lavish wedding venue. The $40,000 diamond tennis bracelet she flashed on social media this morning. And most recently, a massive wire transfer to an exclusive resort in the Maldives. The overwater bungalow my parents had evicted me to pay for was funded entirely by the stolen homes of vulnerable Black grandmothers. My biological parents were bankrolling their obsession with Black excellence using literal blood money extracted from their own people by a white con artist. A cold, electric energy surged through my chest. For 33 years, I had allowed them to make me feel small. I had let them convince me my art was worthless because it did not generate six-figure bonuses. They demanded I respect their wealth, but their wealth was an illusion built on devastation. I looked at the black graduation gown hanging on the closet door. Tomorrow I was going to stand on a stage and accept $700,000 of clean, hard-earned money for a documentary about truth. I realized in that moment I possessed something far more dangerous than a successful film. I held the exact weapon needed to completely dismantle their fraudulent empire forever. I did not sleep. I opened my video editing software and imported the audio files, the highlighted ledgers, and the signed foreclosure notices. I already had extra footage of the gentrified neighborhoods Brad had targeted shot months ago for a scrapped project. I began slicing the clips together. I layered Brad's arrogant recorded voice over images of the eviction notices. I placed screenshots of Jasmine's designer bags right next to the bank transfers, proving where the money came from. I was not just making a video, I was crafting a public execution. Every cut, every transition, every audio spike was designed to expose the ugly, rotten core of the Vance family facade. I worked meticulously, ensuring every piece of evidence was legible and undeniable. The narrative was flawless, a complete devastating indictment of their hypocrisy. By 6 in the morning, my eyes burned, but my mind was razor sharp. The sun began to rise over the working-class neighborhood outside my window, casting long shadows across the small room. I heard the floorboards creak in the hallway as Mrs. Sarah woke up to start the coffee. Today was the day. The day Vanguard Studios would announce their acquisition of my work. The day I would finally step out of the suffocating shadow of my biological family. I hit the export button on the secret teaser trailer and watched the progress bar inch toward 100%. The file rendered perfectly a compressed digital bomb waiting to be detonated. I transferred a copy to an encrypted flash drive and slipped it into the pocket of my graduation dress to keep it secure. Just as the file finished saving to my secure cloud drive, my phone buzzed loudly on the nightstand. I picked it up. It was a new message from Helena in the family group chat. She had sent a glossy, high-definition photograph of a bright blue cocktail resting on the edge of a luxurious infinity pool. In the background, the crystal-clear waters of the Maldives stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The caption beneath the photo read, "Thinking of you. Simone, try not to trip on stage today." I stared at the message, a genuine, terrifying smile taking over my face. They thought they had finally won. They thought they had successfully buried me under their fake wealth and staggering superiority. They truly believed their pristine reputation in Atlanta was untouchable, forever insulated by Brad's corporate success and carefully curated social circles. But they were entirely wrong. I closed my editing software securely, locked my laptop screen, and slowly typed my final reply. Enjoy the drinks, they are your last. I locked my phone and slid it into my pocket, leaving the guest bedroom to join Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah in the kitchen. They were already dressed in their Sunday best, looking nervous but incredibly proud. We drove to the university in my beat-up Honda Civic, a stark contrast to the long line of luxury vehicles waiting at the valet stand outside the grand auditorium. The graduation ceremony for the Master of Fine Arts program was the social event of the season for Atlanta's elite. The massive hall was a sea of designer clothing, sparkling diamonds, and generational wealth. The air smelled of expensive perfume and quiet arrogance. Families gathered in small, exclusive clusters, sipping champagne and loudly congratulating their children. I navigated through the thick crowd, holding my black gown, feeling the heavy flash drive resting securely in my hidden pocket. I stood near the staging area with the other graduates. The whispers started almost immediately. My parents, Marcus and Helena, were highly visible fixtures in the local social scene. Their absence was deafening to the people who thrived on networking and status. A classmate named Chloe, who always made a point to brag about her father's corporate law firm, leaned over to me with a fake sympathetic pout. "Simone, where are Marcus and Helena today? I told my parents to look out for them. It is so weird that they are missing your big moment. Are they sick? I really hope nothing bad happened to your family." I looked at Chloe, my expression perfectly flat. I did not owe her or anyone else in this room a polite lie to protect my family's crumbling reputation. I knew the truth about their dirty money. "They are busy funding a fraud, Chloe," I said sharply. "You should probably warn your father to check his investment portfolios before the federal agents do. The market is going to crash very soon." Chloe blinked, her fake smile dropping instantly as she stepped back, completely stunned by my honesty. She quickly turned around and walked away to whisper to her friends. I turned my attention away from the whispering elites and scanned the entrance of the auditorium. The heavy brass doors opened, and Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah walked in. They looked slightly out of place amidst the sea of billionaires and high society socialites. Mr. David wore a simple, well-pressed gray suit that he saved for church, and Mrs. Sarah wore a modest navy blue dress with a matching hat. They did not have diamond tennis bracelets or custom linen suits. They had calloused hands from decades of hard work and honest living. But as they looked around the grand hall and finally spotted me, their faces beamed with a pure, unadulterated pride that money could never buy. I walked straight past the staring heirs and heiresses rushing over to greet them. "You two look absolutely perfect," I said, hugging Mrs. Sarah tightly. Mr. David patted my shoulder, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "We would not miss this for the world, Simone. You earned every bit of this. We are so proud of the amazing woman you have become." I took them by the arms and guided them down the center aisle of the auditorium. The usher at the front requested to see our tickets. I pulled up the digital boarding passes on my phone and showed him the screen. He nodded politely, unhooking the velvet rope to grant us access to the most exclusive section of the hall. I escorted David and Sarah directly to the front row VIP seats right in the center, mere feet from the main stage. These were the exact velvet-lined chairs my biological parents had abandoned to drink cocktails in the Maldives. David and Sarah sat down looking around at the opulent surroundings with wide eyes, completely unaware of the explosive television broadcast about to take place. I smiled at them one last time before making my way back to the graduate seating area. The heavy red curtains at the front of the stage parted, and the university orchestra began to play a grand, sweeping melody. The audience settled into their seats, the murmurs dying down as the faculty members filed onto the stage. I sat among my peers, my heart hammering a steady, relentless rhythm against my ribs. I looked up toward the balcony level, spotting the heavy television cameras and production crew from Vanguard Studios setting up their broadcast equipment. A glowing red light indicated they were already rolling. The dean of the university, a tall, imposing man in a dark green academic robe, stepped up to the wooden podium. He adjusted the microphone, looking out over the crowd of Atlanta's most powerful families. Normally, this was the part of the ceremony where he delivered a 20-minute speech about academic excellence and the future of art. Instead, he placed his prepared notes down on the podium and looked directly into the camera. The auditorium grew totally quiet as everyone waited for him to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," the dean announced, his voice echoing through the massive sound system, "please take your seats immediately. We have an unprecedented interruption to today's schedule." I leaned forward in my seat, my hands gripping the edges of the wooden armrests, as the entire hall held its collective breath. The whispering had completely stopped. I knew exactly what was coming next, and I knew that the fake empire my parents had built was about to be publicly shattered. The years of neglect and abuse were finally culminating in this very moment. The dean adjusted his thick glasses, his expression unusually solemn, yet carrying an undeniable trace of intense excitement. He looked past the rows of bewildered billionaire donors and focused directly on the section where the graduating students were seated, his gaze seemingly searching for someone specific amidst the sea of black academic gowns and perfectly positioned square graduation caps. "We have special guests." The dean stepped back from the microphone, gesturing toward the heavy velvet curtains at the edge of the stage. A tall, impeccably dressed woman walked out into the harsh glare of the spotlights. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that screamed executive authority. The whispers that had just died down flared up again, echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the auditorium. The billionaire parents sitting behind me leaned forward, recognizing the corporate logo stitched onto the woman's lapel. It was the iconic emblem of Vanguard Studios, the most powerful streaming and production network on the globe. The woman approached the podium with a calm, commanding presence. She adjusted the microphone, looking out over the sea of graduates and elite families. Her eyes scanned the front row, lingering for a fraction of a second on Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah before looking out at the rest of the hall. The camera operators on the balcony hoisted their heavy lenses onto their shoulders, the red recording lights blinking steadily. Live television feeds were being beamed to millions of viewers across the country. I sat perfectly still, my heartbeat drumming fiercely against my ribs. "Good morning, graduates and esteemed families," the woman began, her voice projecting crisp and clear through the massive speakers. "My name is Victoria Sterling. I am the president of original content at Vanguard Studios. Every single year, our executive scouting team travels to the top universities across the nation. We sit in lecture halls and private screening rooms, searching desperately for raw, unfiltered talent. We look for storytellers who possess the courage to hold a mirror up to society and show us the unflinching truth. Usually we find promising student projects needing years of development. We find rough concepts that require our corporate teams to polish and refine them for a mainstream audience. But sometimes, very rarely, we find a generational masterpiece that is already perfect. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the grand auditorium. The wealthy parents around me were practically vibrating with anticipation, likely praying that Victoria was about to announce a massive development deal for one of their own privileged children. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with arrogance. Victoria gripped the edges of the wooden podium. "This year we found a documentary so exceptionally powerful, so devastatingly honest, that our entire board of directors voted unanimously to acquire it within 10 minutes of our private screening." Victoria stepped out from behind the podium, walking to the very edge of the stage. The heavy camera rigs on the balcony physically pivoted, their mechanical gears whining softly as the massive lenses swung directly toward the graduate seating area. The giant digital screens flanking the main stage flickered. The live feed switched from Victoria's face to a tight, high-definition shot of me sitting in my black academic gown. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium as my face was projected to the entire hall and the national television audience. The cameras also captured Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah sitting directly in front of me, their faces radiating absolute pride. The elites sitting behind them stared in utter confusion, wondering why the famous Vance family was not occupying those highly coveted VIP seats. "We are not just honoring a student today," Victoria announced, her voice ringing out with absolute conviction. "We are recognizing a visionary director. Simone Vance, please stand up." I slowly pushed myself out of my seat. My legs felt slightly unsteady, but I kept my posture perfectly straight. I did not look back at the whispering billionaires. I kept my eyes locked on Victoria. The blinding spotlights tracked my movement, illuminating my black gown and the golden tassel. Simone directed and produced a feature-length documentary titled Hands of the Forgotten. Victoria continued, her voice echoing powerfully through the hall. She spent 3 years documenting the resilience of working-class families in this city. She captured the struggles, the systemic exploitation, and the unbreakable spirit of the people who actually built Atlanta. Her film is a masterclass in investigative journalism and raw human emotion. It is a story that demands to be seen by the entire world. Therefore, Vanguard Studios is not just offering a standard development deal today. We are completely bypassing the traditional festival circuit. We are officially purchasing the exclusive global broadcasting rights to Hands of the Forgotten. The words hit the auditorium like a physical shockwave. The wealthy parents, the same people who had mocked my art degree and praised my brother-in-law's fraudulent real estate deals, sat in stunned silence. They finally realized that the quiet, dismissed daughter of Marcus and Helena Vance had just secured the most prestigious corporate acquisition in the history of the university. Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah turned around to look at me, their eyes wide with disbelief and overwhelming joy. Victoria signaled to the side of the stage. Two men in dark suits walked out from behind the heavy red curtains, carrying a massive, oversized presentation check. They stood on either side of Victoria, holding the giant board up for the television cameras to capture clearly. The bright stage lights reflected off the glossy surface of the check, illuminating the bold black numbers printed across the center. Victoria picked up her microphone again, looking directly at me with a proud, triumphant smile. "Simone Vanguard Studios is thrilled to welcome you to our family. We are acquiring your incredible documentary for exactly $700,000. The amount blasted through the speakers, hanging heavily in the tense air. The entire elite auditorium gasped in absolute suffocating silence. $700,000 of clean, hard-earned money. It was a sum that commanded instant, undeniable respect from the very society that spent my entire life trying to tear me down. I took a deep breath, feeling the heavy, encrypted flash drive resting securely in the hidden pocket of my graduation dress. The real show was just getting started now. Victoria gestured for me to join her on the platform. I stepped out from the row of graduates, my black gown swishing softly against the chairs. Every single eye in the massive auditorium tracked my movement. The heavy silence was broken only by the rapid, blinding flashes of professional cameras. The wealthy parents sitting in the audience looked absolutely dumbfounded. These were the same elite socialites who had spent years treating me like an invisible peasant at their lavish country club dinners. They had listened to my mother complain about my useless art degree. Now they were forced to watch me walk up the wooden stairs to claim a fortune. I kept my head high, my shoulders pulled back, and my gaze locked entirely on the giant presentation check. Two men in dark suits held it steady under the glaring stage lights. The bold numbers written across the glossy surface felt incredibly surreal, but they were absolutely real. $700,000. That amount represented total financial liberation. It meant I would never again have to beg Marcus or Helena for basic human decency. Victoria met me at the center of the stage. She extended her hand and I shook it firmly. Her grip was strong, conveying a deep mutual respect. She guided me toward the wooden podium, positioning me right between the oversized check and the main microphone. The television cameras on the balcony zoomed in tight on my face, broadcasting my image to millions of viewers across the national network. I could feel the intense heat radiating from the stage lights. I looked down at the check one more time. The Vanguard Studios logo sat proudly in the top corner. This was not a loan. This was not a handout from a predatory brother-in-law. This was the undeniable reward for 3 years of agonizing, unyielding hard work. I had crawled through the dirtiest, most forgotten neighborhoods in Atlanta to capture the truth, and my dedication had finally paid off. Victoria leaned into the microphone, her voice booming through the grand hall. Simone, a monumental achievement like this does not happen in a vacuum. We know that behind every great director is a foundation of incredible support. I am sure your family is bursting with pride today. Would you like to say a few words to your parents? The elite audience murmured in collective agreement. They all knew the famous Vance family. They fully expected me to deliver a tearful, heartwarming speech about how Marcus and Helena had supported my cinematic dreams. They expected a pristine display of upper-class solidarity. I looked out into the crowd, my eyes scanning the front row. I saw the empty velvet chairs where my biological parents should have been sitting. Then I looked at the VIP seats right next to them where Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah sat holding their breath in pure anticipation. I grabbed the microphone, pulling it slightly closer to my mouth. The auditorium went dead silent again. The air felt charged with an electric, dangerous energy. I did not smile. I did not offer a polite corporate greeting. I looked directly into the glowing red lens of the primary broadcasting camera, knowing exactly who would be watching this footage later. People in Atlanta talk a lot about Black excellence. I began, my voice ringing out cold and sharp as cracked glass. They love to throw grand parties, buy luxury cars, and demand respect while wearing stolen diamonds. They build their entire identities on the illusion of superiority. The wealthy parents in the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the standard polite acceptance speech they were expecting. I gripped the edges of the podium, my knuckles turning white. My biological parents are not here today. I announced, my words echoing like gunshots through the massive hall. Marcus and Helena Vance skipped this defining moment of my life. They chose to fly across the world to sip expensive champagne in the Maldives. But that is not the worst part. I paused, letting the heavy, uncomfortable truth settle over the stunned crowd. They are currently funding their lavish vacation using money drained from predatory loans. They evicted me from my home yesterday to pay for a luxury resort using a white finance broker to scam elderly Black homeowners out of their generational wealth. A collective, horrified gasp erupted from the elite families. Women covered their mouths in absolute shock. Men stared at me in total disbelief. The television crew frantically adjusted their audio levels, capturing every single explosive word. I kept my eyes locked on the camera lens, my expression unyielding. They sold out their own community to maintain a fake, pathetic facade of wealth. They abandoned me because I chose to document the struggles of the very people they were ruthlessly exploiting. So no, Victoria, I will not be thanking Marcus or Helena Vance today. They are cowards, they are frauds, and they are dead to me. The silence in the auditorium was now utterly suffocating. The Vanguard executives on stage stood frozen, realizing they were broadcasting a monumental high society scandal on live television. I had just publicly dismantled one of the most prominent families in the city. There was no coming back from this. The Vance name was officially destroyed. I turned my gaze away from the broadcasting camera and looked directly down at the front row. The harshness in my chest suddenly melted away, replaced by a profound, overwhelming warmth. I pointed my finger straight at the VIP section. But I will thank my real parents, I declared, my voice echoing with fierce, protective love. I will thank the people who actually showed up when I had absolutely nothing left. I gestured warmly toward the two working-class heroes sitting in the velvet chairs, their faces covered in beautiful, shining tears of shock. Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah, please come up to the stage right now to stand by my side. Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah sat frozen in the front row, their eyes wide with absolute shock. The entire auditorium turned to look at them, the whispering reaching a fever pitch. These were not the famous wealthy parents the elite crowd expected to see. Mr. David slowly stood up, smoothing the front of his faded gray suit. He reached down and gently took his wife by the hand. Mrs. Sarah was already crying, her shoulders shaking as she let her husband guide her out of the velvet-lined chairs. They walked up the center aisle together. The billionaire families sitting nearby pulled their designer bags closer, clearly uncomfortable with the presence of working-class people invading their space. I did not care about their discomfort. I kept my hand extended, waiting for the only two people who mattered. Mr. David guided Mrs. Sarah up the short wooden stairs to the platform. Victoria stepped back respectfully, allowing them to take the center stage. I wrapped my arms around Mrs. Sarah, holding her tightly as she sobbed into my shoulder. I pulled Mr. David into the embrace, feeling his calloused hands patting my back. I stepped back and faced the television cameras once again. The red recording lights blinked relentlessly. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. When my biological family threw me onto the street, they told me that a true artist must struggle. I said, my voice projecting crisp and clear through the speakers. They told me my documentary was ghetto trash unworthy of their financial support. They locked me out of my apartment just 24 hours ago so they could fly to a luxury resort in the Maldives. But these two incredible people standing next to me did not hesitate. When I was crying in my car, ready to give up on my dream, Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah secretly mortgaged their only retirement home. They risked their entire financial future to hand me a check for $50,000. They did not do it for fame. They did not do it for a return on investment. They did it because they believed in me when my own blood relatives abandoned me. The audience remained completely silent. The truth was finally exposed. I reached into the deep pocket of my graduation gown. My fingers brushed past the encrypted flash drive containing Brad's financial crimes, but I bypassed it. Instead, I pulled out a folded, legally binding contract that I had drafted early this morning. I unfolded the thick paper and smoothed it out flat on the wooden podium right next to the giant Vanguard Studios presentation check. I picked up a black pen and looked at Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah. As the executive producer and sole owner of Hands of the Forgotten, my very first official act is to repay my debts, I announced to the national television audience. I am not just paying back the $50,000 loan. These two working-class heroes gave me the power to tell the truth. Therefore, I am formally transferring exactly half of this acquisition deal directly into their bank account. The number echoed through the grand hall. $350,000, Mrs. Sarah let out a loud gasp. Her knees buckled slightly, but Mr. David caught her, his face drenched in tears. Simone, no, you cannot do that, Mr. David whispered, shaking his head. That is your money. You earned it. I smiled at him, my heart overflowing with immense gratitude. I earned it because you gave me a roof and a chance. This money belongs to you. I pressed the black pen to the thick paper and signed my name on the bottom line. The contract was officially executed. I handed the document to Mr. David. He took it with trembling hands, staring at my signature. The reality of the moment finally set in. The mortgage on their small home was paid off. Their retirement was completely secure. They would never have to worry about another late payment notice from the bank ever again. The tension in the elite auditorium suddenly broke. The blatant, horrific optics of the Vance family's greed had been completely overshadowed by a display of profound, undeniable loyalty. A wealthy father in the third row stood up and began to clap. Then, a mother next to him stood up. Within seconds, the entire auditorium of Atlanta's most powerful families rose to their feet. They erupted into a massive, deafening standing ovation for Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah. The applause thundered off the vaulted ceilings, a roaring validation of true character over fake wealth. The Vanguard executives smiled, knowing they had just broadcast the most compelling television moment of the year. The live feed captured every tear, every clap, and every word. The control room at Vanguard Studios immediately clipped the segment. They uploaded the high-definition video directly to Twitter and every single social media platform. The internet moves with terrifying speed. Within 10 minutes, the clip of me exposing my parents and giving away $350,000 hit 1 million views. The hashtag denouncing the Vance family began trending. People demanded to know how Marcus and Helena could evict their own daughter for a vacation. The public outrage was explosive. I hugged Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah, letting the applause wash over us. Victoria shook my hand again, her eyes gleaming with absolute respect. I grabbed the hem of my black gown and guided my real parents down the wooden stairs of the stage. As my feet hit the carpeted floor of the main aisle, I felt a violent, aggressive vibration against my leg. My phone was blowing up inside my hidden pocket. I reached down and pulled the device out. The screen was completely lit up with notifications rapidly scrolling past my eyes. My heart pounded as I looked at the missed call log. The number sitting at the very top of the screen was staggering. 88 missed calls. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone. The device vibrated violently, another incoming call from Helena trying to break through. I hit ignore, cutting off the transmission instantly. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, focusing on the two people walking beside me. The elite crowd was still cheering as I guided Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah through heavy side doors. We stepped away from the blinding stage lights and entered a private soundproof room reserved for Vanguard Studios executives. The doors clicked shut completely, muting the roaring auditorium. Mrs. Sarah immediately collapsed onto a plush leather sofa, burying her face in her hands as she wept tears of joy. Mr. David sat beside her, wrapping his arms around her trembling shoulders. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and full of an emotion I had never received from my biological father, pure gratitude. Victoria followed us into the room, signaling to the production assistants to give us privacy. She offered us bottles of cold water and smiled. I took a bottle, twisted the cap off, and took a long drink. The adrenaline was settling, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I sat down on a velvet armchair across from my real parents. My pocket buzzed again. The relentless buzzing was a desperate rhythm of panic from a family that had just watched their fake empire crumble on national television. I pulled the phone out and unlocked the screen. 42 missed calls from Helena, 30 from Marcus, 16 from Jasmine. I opened our family group chat, a digital space I had spent years trying to be heard in. Today, I did not have to speak a single word to command their absolute attention. The chat was a frantic war zone of upper-class entitlement. Helena had sent a block of text in all capital letters. "Answer the phone. You are humiliating us in front of our country club. Brad is on the phone with lawyers. Reverse that money transfer." I read her words, feeling nothing but pity for her shallow existence. Even now, exposed on a national stage, her primary concern was her country club status. She did not care that she had evicted her own daughter. A new message popped up on the screen, this one from Jasmine. "Are you completely insane? You gave $350,000 to the janitor's family. That money belongs to us. I am pregnant. Brad is absolutely furious with you. You are destroying my baby moon. Call Mom back right now before Brad sues you for defamation." I stared at Jasmine's message. She had the audacity to demand my hard-earned money while lounging in an overwater bungalow funded by predatory loans. She called the people who saved my life a janitor's family. Her husband was a literal criminal stealing from elderly black homeowners, but she was angry at me for ruining her vacation. I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace for 33 years. I looked down at the coffee table in the center of the room. I reached into the folder Victoria had given me and pulled out my official signed copy of the Vanguard Studios broadcasting contract. I placed the thick, legally binding document flat on the glass surface. The acquisition amount of $700,000 was printed boldly across the front page. Then I reached into the pocket of my jeans underneath my graduation gown. I pulled out the crisp, crumpled $100 bill that Brad had arrogantly thrown at my feet in the Ritz-Carlton lobby just yesterday. I smoothed out the creases of the bill and placed it directly next to the massive Vanguard contract. The visual contrast was striking. $100 of dirty, stolen money sitting next to a $700,000 testament of truth and hard work. I opened the camera application on my phone. I framed the shot perfectly, making sure the Vanguard logo, the acquisition amount, and Brad's pathetic $100 bill were all in sharp focus. I snapped the picture. I opened the chaotic family group chat. The typing indicators from Marcus, Helena, and Jasmine were dancing wildly at the bottom of the screen. I attached the high-resolution photograph to the chat. I hit send. The image delivered instantly. The three typing indicators abruptly vanished. The sudden digital silence was incredibly satisfying. They were looking at the undeniable proof that their scapegoat had just succeeded. I did not wait for their inevitably toxic replies. I tapped the text box and typed my final message to the Vance family. Every single keystroke felt like a heavy chain snapping off my chest. You wanted me to catch an Uber. I bought the whole fleet. Enjoy the island. I hit send. The message delivered flawlessly. I did not give them a single second to respond. I tapped the settings icon in the top right corner of the group chat. I scrolled down to the very bottom of the long menu. I pressed the red button labeled Block All. A confirmation prompt popped up asking if I was absolutely sure I wanted to block these contacts from calling or messaging me ever again. I pressed Confirm. The screen refreshed instantly cleanly, severing my digital connection to Marcus, Helena, Jasmine, and Brad forever. The relentless vibrating in my hand finally stopped. Absolute silence enveloped my phone. I locked the screen and tossed the device onto the glass coffee table, right next to the Vanguard contract. I took a deep, cleansing breath. The heavy, suffocating weight I had carried since childhood evaporated into the cool air of the room. I turned my attention back to the plush leather sofa. Mr. David had finished wiping his eyes. Mrs. Sarah was smiling at me, her face glowing with a profound, beautiful peace. I walked over and sat down right between them. We did not need to say anything else. The long war was finally and officially over. 9,000 miles away from the green room, the tropical sun beat down relentlessly on the Indian Ocean. The Vance family occupied the most expensive overwater bungalow at an exclusive Maldives resort, a sprawling architectural marvel of teak wood and infinity pools. Just moments ago, it was a paradise. Now, it was a beautifully decorated prison. Helena paced frantically across the sun-drenched deck, her silk designer caftan whipping violently in the ocean breeze. She gripped her phone so tightly, her knuckles were completely white. The audio from her call was on speakerphone, projecting the mocking laughter of Patricia, the president of the elite Atlanta Country Club. "I cannot believe you are laughing right now, Patricia!" Helena shrieked, her voice cracking with pure panic. "You know Simone is unstable. She just ambushed us on national television. We are the innocent victims here." Patricia chuckled. "Helena, stop embarrassing yourself. The entire country club is watching the broadcast. Your daughter gave $350,000 to a mechanic because you evicted her. The board members are absolutely disgusted. We took a unanimous vote. Your membership is permanently revoked, effective immediately." "You cannot do that," Helena gasped. "We built that club. Marcus donated millions to your annual galas." "You were the heart of Atlanta society," Patricia corrected. "Now you are a cautionary tale about fake wealth. Evicting your black daughter to fund a vacation for your white son-in-law is disgraceful. Do not ever call this number again." The phone line went completely dead. Helena dropped the phone, her immaculate composure shattered. She stared out at the turquoise water chest heaving as the reality of her social annihilation settled over her. Inside the living room, Jasmine was having a full-scale meltdown. She sat on a white linen sofa crying hysterically while frantically refreshing her social media feeds. "This is a total disaster," Jasmine wailed. "My brand sponsors are dropping me. People are calling me a gold digger and a fraud. Simone completely ruined my entire baby moon." Marcus sat heavily in a rattan chair. "Forget your sponsors, Jasmine. Simone just humiliated our entire legacy on live television. She exposed the eviction. We will never be able to show our faces at another charity gala in Atlanta." Brad, oblivious to the crisis, walked onto the deck wearing expensive designer swim trunks and dark sunglasses. He held a crystal glass of sparkling water, his arrogant smirk firmly in place. He foolishly believed his wealth shielded him from any real consequences. "Everybody calm down," Brad said confidently. "Simone is just throwing a temper tantrum. She gave away half her money because she is financially illiterate. We will hire a crisis management firm later. Right now, I am booking that $5,000 private yacht excursion. We are going to drink champagne and ignore the noise. Brad set his glass down and strolled out of the villa, walking down the boardwalk toward the resort's main pavilion. He moved with the overwhelming entitlement of a man who believed the world belonged to him. He walked through the open-air lobby, approaching the marble concierge desk with a lazy, arrogant swagger. "I need the luxury catamaran for 4 hours," Brad demanded, leaning against the counter. "Have them stock it with vintage champagne and seafood. Put it all on my tab." The concierge, a polite man in a crisp uniform, smiled and typed the request into the computer. "Certainly, sir. The total will be $5,200. I just need to swipe your card to authorize the incidental hold." Brad pulled a heavy metal black card from his leather wallet and slid it across the marble counter. "Make sure they ice the champagne properly this time." The concierge slid the heavy card through the card reader. A harsh beep sounded from the machine. The screen flashed a bright red error message. The polite smile on the concierge's face faltered slightly. "I apologize, sir, but the card has been declined," the concierge said quietly, trying to maintain discretion. Brad rolled his eyes, letting out an annoyed sigh. "Your machine is probably broken. That is an unlimited account. Just run it again." The concierge swiped the metal card a second time. The machine beeped harshly again. The same red error message filled the screen. "It is declining again, sir. Do you perhaps have another form of payment?" Brad's jaw tightened in frustration. He snatched the black card back and pulled out a platinum credit card from a completely different banking institution. "Run this one, and you need to fix your payment system. This is highly inconvenient." The concierge swiped the platinum card. Beep. Declined. Brad's confident posture suddenly cracked. A cold bead of sweat formed on the back of his neck. He pulled out a third card, a corporate expense account linked to his commercial real estate firm in Atlanta. He shoved it at the concierge. "Run it," Brad ordered, his voice losing its arrogant edge. The concierge swiped the corporate card. The machine beeped loudly. Declined. Brad snatched his cards back, his hands suddenly trembling. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket and aggressively opened his primary banking application. He typed in his password. The screen loaded, displaying his checking and savings accounts. A massive red banner spanned across the top of the interface. The text read, "Access denied, accounts frozen by federal order." Brad stopped breathing. The air in his lungs turned to ice. He had not realized the true danger of Simone's broadcast. When she stood on that stage and boldly declared that her family was funding a luxury vacation through predatory loans, she had explicitly named the specific shell companies. That single mention on national television, combined with the encrypted files she had quietly forwarded to the authorities, had triggered an immediate algorithmic flag across the banking network. The federal regulators had frozen every single asset Brad owned within minutes of the broadcast. Back at the overwater bungalow, Marcus was pacing the living room floor, trying to call his personal lawyers in Atlanta. Every call went straight to voicemail. The entire legal team was actively avoiding him. Helena sat on the sofa next to a sobbing Jasmine, holding her head in her hands. The front door of the villa chimed and a polite knock followed. Marcus ripped the door open, expecting to see Brad returning with champagne. Instead, the general manager of the resort stood on the porch, flanked by 2 large, imposing security guards. The manager's face was completely devoid of the welcoming warmth he displayed when they checked in. "Mr. Vance, I apologize for the interruption," the manager said, stepping into the living room uninvited. "We have a critical financial emergency that requires your immediate attention." Marcus frowned, puffing his chest out in a desperate attempt to maintain authority. "What are you talking about? My son-in-law handles the finances for this trip. Go speak to Brad." "We just spoke to him at the concierge desk, sir," the manager replied coldly. "Your son-in-law's credit cards are completely bouncing. Every single payment method he presented has been declined by the banks due to a severe federal hold." Helena gasped, standing up from the sofa. "What do you mean his cards are bouncing? He is a millionaire." "He currently has 0 accessible funds," the manager stated bluntly. Your family has racked up an extensive bill. The private flights, the premium dining, and the booking for this exclusive overwater villa have not been successfully processed. The total outstanding balance is $40,000. Marcus reached for his wallet, his hands shaking. This is a banking error. I will cover the balance with my personal card. We already attempted to run the card you left on file for incidentals, Mr. Vance, the manager said, crossing his arms. It was also declined. It appears your domestic accounts are experiencing the exact same federal restrictions. The color drained entirely from Marcus's face. His entire financial safety net had been severed. The manager stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous, uncompromising tone. Sir, we need immediate payment for the $40,000 villa, or we will involve the local authorities right now. Marcus stared at the resort manager in absolute horror. He frantically pulled out his emergency backup cards, the ones he kept strictly for business tax purposes. His hands shook as he handed them over to the security guards. It took 4 different credit cards, completely maxing out his available lines of credit just to satisfy the outstanding balance. The manager did not smile or offer a polite farewell. He simply handed Marcus the receipts and ordered the family to vacate the premises within 20 minutes. The luxurious baby moon was officially over. Helena scrambled around the overwater bungalow, frantically throwing expensive resort wear and designer toiletries into her leather suitcases. Jasmine sobbed loudly on the edge of the bed, clutching her diamond tennis bracelet as if it were a life preserver. Brad paced the wooden deck, cursing under his breath as he repeatedly tried to call his legal team in Atlanta. Every single call went straight to a generic voicemail box. His corporate empire was burning to the ground, and he was stuck on a tiny island in the Indian Ocean. The family dragged their heavy Louis Vuitton luggage down the wooden boardwalk entirely unassisted by the resort staff. The other wealthy guests watched them leave in humiliating silence. They managed to secure a cramped speedboat ride back to the main international airport in Malé. Marcus stood at the airline ticketing counter, his face pale and sweating under the fluorescent terminal lights. He had to use the last remaining balance on his final credit card to book 4 return tickets to Atlanta. The ticketing agent looked at him with an apologetic frown. She informed him that there were absolutely no premium seats available on such short notice. The only available options were scattered seats in the very last row of the economy-class cabin, directly next to the public restrooms. Marcus had no choice. He authorized the humiliating payment. The famous Vance family, who prided themselves on private drivers and exclusive airport lounges, sat on hard plastic chairs in the crowded public terminal for 6 hours, waiting for their departure. Helena kept her oversized designer sunglasses firmly on her face to hide her puffy red eyes. When they finally boarded the massive commercial airplane, they were forced to shuffle down the narrow aisle, bumping their expensive luggage against the seated passengers. They squeezed into the cramped middle seats at the very back of the aircraft. The smell of the nearby lavatories wafted through the thin curtain. The 24-hour flight was an absolute nightmare of physical discomfort and psychological torture. Jasmine cried for the entire first leg of the journey. She continuously complained about the lack of legroom and the terrible airplane food. She refused to take accountability for her husband's criminal actions. Instead, she directed all of her venom toward her sister. "I cannot believe Simone ruined my baby moon like this," Jasmine whined loudly enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "She is so bitter and jealous of my success. She probably planned this whole stunt just to embarrass me because I have a husband and she has nothing." Brad ignored his weeping wife completely. He purchased the overpriced, painfully slow wireless internet package on the airplane and spent hours frantically refreshing his email inbox. His face grew paler with every passing minute. He was reading urgent updates from his junior associates back in Georgia. The federal investigators were not just freezing his personal accounts. They were actively raiding the corporate offices of his commercial real estate firm. They were seizing computer servers, filing cabinets, and physical ledgers. His elaborate Ponzi scheme was unraveling at lightning speed, and he was trapped in a metal tube suspended 30,000 feet in the air. Helena leaned over the armrest, her pristine image completely ruined by exhaustion and stress. She aggressively poked Marcus in the shoulder. "We need to fix this the minute we touch down, Marcus," Helena hissed, her voice sharp and calculating. Do not act like this is the end of the world. Your daughter still has $350,000 left from that broadcasting contract. That is liquid cash sitting in her bank account right now. Marcus rubbed his bloodshot eyes, looking at his wife in disbelief. Helena Simone just disowned us on national television. She is not going to give us a single dime. Helena scoffed, waving her hand dismissively in the cramped cabin space. Simone is just throwing a tantrum because she wants attention. She is still our child and she owes us for raising her. We are a family and families help each other. We just need to drive over there and talk to her properly. We will demand that she transfers the remaining funds to Brad. He can invest the money quickly, unfreeze the corporate accounts, and fix this entire legal mess before the country club board makes our expulsion permanent. We just have to remind her who is in charge. The massive airplane finally touched down on the runway at the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The heavy landing gear screeched loudly against the rough concrete tarmac. The Vance family stumbled off the aircraft, looking completely broken. Their designer clothes were deeply wrinkled, their faces were haggard from sleep deprivation, and their arrogant postures had collapsed under the heavy weight of financial panic. They aggressively pushed through the crowded baggage claim area, desperately grabbing their scuffed luggage off the moving carousel. They marched straight out to the humid curbside pickup zone. They did not have a private black car waiting for them. Marcus was forced to hail a standard yellow taxicab. They shoved their heavy bags into the small trunk and crammed into the back seat. They did not go to their sprawling estate. They ordered the tired taxicab driver to head directly toward the busy streets of Midtown Atlanta. They were fully prepared to use their parental authority to brutally manipulate Simone Gaslight, her into submission, and fiercely demand her fortune. While my biological family was suffocating in the back of a dirty taxicab, I was standing on top of the world. The bright sunlight poured through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my brand-new production office in Midtown Atlanta. It had been exactly 72 hours since the graduation ceremony, and my entire reality had radically shifted. I stood near the sleek glass conference table, looking out over the sprawling, vibrant city skyline. My name was already painted in bold black letters across the frosted glass of the double entry doors. Simone Vance Productions. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of the polished wooden desk, feeling a deep, anchoring sense of permanence. I was not renting a tiny, dilapidated studio apartment anymore. I held a 5-year commercial lease paid entirely in full. I sat down in my ergonomic leather chair and opened my laptop to finalize the corporate paperwork. The elite legal team at Vanguard Studios had just sent over the finalized acquisition contracts. I reviewed the heavy binding clauses with absolute clarity. The remaining $350,000 had officially cleared my business accounts that very morning. I was no longer a struggling artist begging for scraps from a family that despised my existence. I was a fully funded executive producer with total creative control over my next 3 documentary projects. The heavy glass doors of my office swung open. The rich, mouth-watering scent of baked macaroni and cheese and slow-roasted brisket instantly filled the sterile corporate air. Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah walked into the room carrying 2 large aluminum foil pans and beaming with an infectious, overwhelming joy. Mr. David wore a crisp new polo shirt, and Mrs. Sarah had treated herself to a beautiful new silk scarf. The heavy burden of financial anxiety that had aged them for so long was completely gone. I immediately pushed my chair back and rushed over to help them set the heavy pans down on the conference table. "You two did not have to cook for me," I said, hugging Mrs. Sarah tightly. "I told you I was going to take you out to the most expensive steakhouse in Atlanta tonight to celebrate properly." "Nobody celebrates with tiny portions of overpriced meat, Simone." Mrs. Sarah laughed, patting my cheek affectionately. "We brought you real honest food to bless this beautiful new office. You need your strength to run this massive empire." Mr. David pulled out a folded piece of thick watermarked paper from his chest pocket. He smoothed it out on the glass table with trembling, reverent hands. It was an official letter from his mortgage lender. "We went to the bank first thing yesterday morning," Mr. David announced, his voice thick with unbridled emotion. "We paid off the entire second mortgage. We paid off the original house loan. We completely own our home free and clear, Simone." And we put the rest of the money straight into a high-yield retirement account. I'm officially hanging up my mechanic overalls next month. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I looked at the bank document, feeling a profound wave of justice wash over me. You deserved this piece years ago, Mr. David. You both did. We sat around the glass table eating the incredible food straight from the aluminum pans with plastic forks. The atmosphere in the room was warm, triumphant, and fiercely protective. I looked at the two of them laughing together, and a quiet realization settled deep within my chest. For 33 years, I had chased the toxic moving target of my biological parents' approval. Marcus and Helena believed that love was a calculated transaction. They demanded absolute perfection and subservience in exchange for basic, bare minimum acknowledgement. They viewed family as a ruthless corporate merger, eagerly cutting ties with anyone who threatened their superficial social standing. But real love did not demand a perfect return on investment. Real love provided a safe harbor during the darkest, most terrifying storms. David and Sarah had risked their own survival to catch me when I was falling. They never asked me to change my dreams to make them look better at a wealthy country club. They just loved me exactly as I was. That was the true definition of Black excellence. I took another bite of the tender brisket, savoring the comforting flavor, when the sleek digital intercom on my desk suddenly buzzed with an urgent, sharp tone. I pressed the flashing green button. My newly hired receptionist, a sharp and highly efficient woman named Maya, spoke through the speaker. Her voice was uncharacteristically tight with severe alarm. "Ms. Simone, I am so incredibly sorry to interrupt your lunch," Maya said quickly, her breathing slightly elevated. "But there is a serious escalating situation occurring down in the lobby right now. 4 people just barged past the building security guards in the main atrium. They violently refused to sign in or show any identification at the front desk. They just forced their way into the private elevator bank, and they are coming directly up to our floor." I froze completely, the plastic fork stopping halfway to my mouth. A cold, familiar dread attempted to crawl up my spine, but I immediately crushed it down, replacing the old fear with absolute, unshakable authority. I was the boss now. "Who exactly are they, Maya?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. "They loudly stated they are your parents, your sister, and your brother-in-law," Maya replied, sounding genuinely concerned for my physical safety. "And Ms. Simone, they look incredibly angry. They are demanding to see you immediately, screaming about a stolen inheritance and a ruined vacation. I am calling the police right now. Stay perfectly safe inside your locked office door until the security officers can arrive and officially escort those 4 volatile trespassers completely out of this commercial building before they can cause any further physical property damage. Misa, do not call the local police just yet, Maya," I said, my voice projecting absolute authority through the intercom. "Cancel the emergency security request immediately, unlock the main glass doors, and let them walk right into my private office. I have been waiting patiently for this exact conversation today." I released the glowing intercom button and stood up from my desk. Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah looked at me with protective concern, but I gently placed my hands on their shoulders. "Please stay right here and continue eating," I told them warmly. "You are my honored guests. They hold no power in this room." Heavy footsteps echoed down the polished corporate corridor. Through the transparent glass walls of my office, I watched the famous Vance family marching furiously toward my suite. The visual contrast was staggering. 72 hours ago, they stood in the Ritz-Carlton lobby, dripping in designer linen, radiating arrogant superiority. Now they looked like broken survivors of a catastrophic shipwreck. Helena's meticulously highlighted hair was flat and greasy from the economy flight. Marcus wore a severely wrinkled, sweat-stained button-down shirt. Jasmine carried her heavy fake Louis Vuitton designer bag, her face red and blotchy from crying across 3 different continents. But Brad was the most pathetic sight of all. The wealthy, untouchable white finance executive who had maliciously thrown a $100 bill at my feet looked completely unhinged. His expensive loafers scuffed awkwardly against the hardwood floor. His bloodshot eyes darted around my massive production office with a turbulent mixture of raw desperation and naked envy. He was sweating profusely, the physical manifestation of a frantic man who knew his criminal empire was actively burning to the ground. Brad shoved the heavy frosted glass door open without even knocking. The four of them stormed into my office, bringing a frantic energy that clashed with the peaceful, triumphant atmosphere I had built. They desperately tried to arrange themselves in a dominant formation across from my desk, but their exhausted, severely disheveled appearances completely ruined the intimidation tactic. Helena immediately stepped forward, attempting to deploy her signature emotional manipulation. She forced a strained, fake smile onto her face, completely ignoring the presence of Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah sitting quietly at my conference table. "Simone, sweetie, how could you do that to us on TV?" Helena said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We have been worried sick about you. We are a family, and families have minor disagreements, but you never air private business to the public. You humiliated your father and me in front of our country club, but we are willing to forgive your outburst. We flew all the way back from our vacation just to help you manage this windfall. You need to wire the remaining $350,000 to Brad's corporate account right now so he can secure it in a trust for you." C-E-D. Jasmine nodded vigorously, clutching her luxury designer bag. "Yes, Simone. You clearly do not understand how complex taxes work on a financial payout that large. You are going to lose everything to the government if you do not let Brad protect the funds immediately. Just sign the bank routing papers so we can fix this entire disaster." I did not stand up to meet their frantic energy. I slowly lowered myself back into my ergonomic leather chair, crossing my legs and calmly interlacing my fingers resting on the polished wood desk. I looked at the four of them, feeling absolutely no anger, no sorrow, and no lingering obligation. I felt nothing but a cold curiosity at their sheer audacity. "You evicted me exactly 2 days ago, Helena," I said, my voice echoing evenly across the incredibly spacious room. "You legally terminated my residential lease, seized my entire security deposit, and told me that a true artist needs to struggle. You literally forced me onto the street so you could upgrade your resort package. The only thing I owe you is the dust on my shoes." Marcus stepped forward, his face flushing dark red with traditional patriarchal fury. He pointed a shaking finger directly at me. "Do not speak to your mother with that disrespectful tone, Simone. You are acting like a spoiled, ungrateful child. You gave away half of your wealth to these random people." Marcus gestured toward David and Sarah with absolute disgust. "You threw away a fortune just to spite us. You are going to transfer the rest of those funds to Brad's management firm today, or I swear I will have our lawyers tie your production company up in endless family litigation for the next 10 years. We will freeze your assets until you beg us for financial help." I let out a loud, sharp, genuine laugh. The sound bounced off the glass walls, shattering Marcus's illusion of supreme control. "You do not have any lawyers left, Marcus," I replied, maintaining unbroken eye contact. "Your elite legal team abandoned you while you were flying coach over the Atlantic Ocean. You maxed out every credit card you own just to escape the Maldives because your son-in-law is completely broke. Do not threaten me with resources you no longer possess." Helena gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Jasmine started crying again, stomping her foot on the hardwood floor. But the undeniable truth of my words hit Brad like a physical strike. The fake facade he used to manipulate my parents melted away. The desperate finance broker realized his manipulation tactics were useless against me. I held the only lifeline that could save him from financial ruin, and I was actively denying him access. Brad lost his temper entirely. The veins in his neck bulged against his wrinkled collar. He shoved Marcus out of the way, closing the short distance between us. He stepped forward with a violent energy and slammed both of his hands down hard onto the surface of my wooden desk, revealing his ugly true colors. The heavy impact of his palms against the polished wood echoed sharply through the spacious room. Brad leaned his upper body over the edge of the desk, invading my personal space with a calculated, aggressive hostility. His designer cologne, a sharp and metallic scent, clashed violently with the warm aroma of the home-cooked meal sitting on the conference table behind me. His face was twisted into a grotesque mask of absolute fury, completely stripping away the polished, elite finance broker persona he usually paraded around the country club. This was the real Brad. He was a desperate, entitled man who fundamentally believed he possessed an inherent right to control the women around him, especially a black woman who had just publicly humiliated him on national television. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I remained perfectly seated in my leather chair, observing his frantic physical intimidation with clinical, icy detachment. "Listen to me, you arrogant dropout!" Brad sneered, his voice dropping into a menacing guttural threat that filled the quiet room. "You think, because you got lucky with some pathetic art project, that you suddenly understand how the real world operates? You do not know how money actually works. You are financially illiterate, Simone. The IRS is going to eat you alive. The federal government will completely seize that massive payout before the end of the fiscal quarter if you do not have professional corporate shielding. You are going to formally sign that money over to my management firm today. If you refuse, I swear to God I will tie your tiny production company up in endless family litigation for a decade. I will legally bury you until you have absolutely nothing left to your name." Jasmine pushed her way past our stunned father and marched right up to the desk, standing shoulder to shoulder with her furious husband. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, weaponizing her impending motherhood, in a pathetic attempt to guilt me into submission. Her eyes were wide with a frantic, greedy desperation. "Brad is absolutely right, Simone," Jasmine demanded, her voice shrill and commanding. "I am currently carrying the very first grandchild of this family. We have an actual legacy to protect. That money rightfully belongs to my baby's future, not some ghetto charity case. You cannot just hand away hundreds of thousands of dollars to a random mechanic and his wife when your own blood sister needs to secure an elite education and a proper trust fund for her child. You owe this family your loyalty." I looked from Jasmine to Brad, letting the profound absurdity of their demands wash over me. For my entire life, Marcus and Helena had practically worshipped the ground Brad walked on. They had elevated him to the status of a god within our household simply because he was white and presented an illusion of generational wealth. My parents had ruthlessly sacrificed their own black daughter's dreams, evicted me from my home, and mocked my ambitions, all to appease this man's fragile, toxic ego. They had eagerly traded their dignity for a seat at his imaginary table. And now this so-called financial genius was standing in my production office, sweating through his wrinkled shirt, aggressively demanding that I surrender my hard-earned capital to save him from his own catastrophic failures. He was trying to colonize my success because his own fraudulent foundation was rapidly turning to ash right before his panicking eyes. Behind me, I heard the faint rustle of clothing. Mr. David had stood up from the conference table, his protective instincts flaring as Brad continued to loom over my desk. Mrs. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm, silently urging him to let me handle the confrontation alone. They knew I did not need a physical shield against these pathetic bullies. They had watched me build my resilience from the ground up, forging my strength in the fires of relentless rejection. I did not need anyone to rescue me from my biological family ever again. I possessed all the power in this room, and it was finally time to exercise it with absolute lethal precision to protect everything I had built for myself. I slowly reached across the smooth surface of the desk, my movements deliberate and completely unbothered by his frantic energy. My fingers bypassed the expensive pen holder and gracefully wrapped around a small, sleek black remote control resting near my computer monitor. Brad watched my movement carefully, his aggressive posture faltering for a fraction of a second, as confusion temporarily interrupted his violent rage. He clearly expected me to break down crying, begging for my family's forgiveness. He expected me to cave under the overwhelming pressure of familial obligation and his aggressive corporate threats. He was entirely unprepared for the calculated execution I had meticulously planned since 3 in the morning, an execution that would leave him with absolutely nothing. I held the small remote control up the dark plastic cool against my palm as the room waited in breathless silence. I looked Brad directly in his bloodshot eyes, allowing a sharp, genuinely dangerous smile to form on my lips. You want to talk about how money works, Brad? I asked, my voice slicing through the heavy tension in the room with effortless authority. You want to discuss massive corporate deals, tax implications, and the stark reality of financial shielding? That sounds like a fantastic idea to me. Let us take a very close, highly detailed look at your specific investment portfolio and your offshore accounts. Without breaking eye contact, I firmly pressed the top button on the remote control. A low, powerful electronic hum instantly resonated through the walls of the spacious office. Instantly, the transparent smart glass surrounding my entire production suite shifted, turning completely opaque and sealing the five of us inside an inescapable, secure, and entirely soundproof vault. I was about to show them exactly what true power looked like. I pressed the second button on the sleek black remote control resting in my palm. The ceiling tiles above my polished wooden desk slid apart with a soft mechanical whir. A massive 85-inch high-definition viewing screen slowly descended into the center of the completely opaque soundproof office. The sudden darkness in the room was absolute, broken only by the ambient glow of my computer monitor. Jasmine let out a nervous, high-pitched gasp, stepping closer to her husband. Brad stood frozen, his hands still gripping the edge of my desk, his aggressive posture rapidly dissolving into genuine confusion. Marcus and Helena exchanged wary glances, completely unsure of how to assert their parental authority in a room that I so clearly dominated. They expected me to show them my Vanguard Studios broadcasting contract, or perhaps a spreadsheet of my production budget. They fundamentally underestimated my capacity for total destruction. I did not say a single word. I simply pressed play. The giant screen ignited with blinding stark white light. A deep resonant bass note thrummed through the state-of-the-art surround sound speakers embedded in the walls, vibrating the hardwood floor beneath their expensive designer shoes. The bright white light faded into a highly stylized cinematic montage. But the footage playing on the massive screen was not from Hands of the Forgotten. It was not the award-winning documentary that had just earned me $700,000 on national television. It was the highly classified secret teaser trailer for my very next investigative project. The opening shot displayed a sweeping drone-captured aerial view of the most historic, culturally rich Black neighborhoods in Atlanta. The camera slowly panned down to focus on rows of beautiful, modest brick homes owned by generations of hardworking blue-collar families. My own voice, professionally recorded and digitally mastered, echoed through the dark office as the narrator. Atlanta is a city built on the illusion of progress, my voiceover stated coldly. But behind the glamorous country club dinners and the gated suburban mansions, a vicious financial predator has been quietly hunting our most vulnerable elders. This is the story of how a fake old money broker scammed millions of dollars from the people who actually built this city. Brad let go of my desk and stumbled backward as if he had been physically struck in the chest. His face, previously flushed with arrogant rage, drained to a sickening chalky white. The massive screen flashed a highly confidential internal corporate document. The bold, undeniable logo of Brad's commercial real estate investment firm filled the entire 85-inch display. My parents gasped loudly in unison. This was the exact same company they proudly bragged about to their elite social circle. The fast-paced montage continued with merciless precision. The screen displayed dozens of hidden camera recordings, recorded phone calls, and heartbreaking video testimonies from elderly Black victims who had been ruthlessly evicted from their lifelong homes. The victims described the predatory refinancing loans, the hidden interest clauses, and the aggressive legal tactics used to steal their property deeds. Every single accusation was immediately backed up by a flash of undeniable, highlighted corporate paperwork bearing Brad's direct signature. Jasmine covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with mounting terror as the trailer progressed. "What is this, Simone?" she cried out, her voice trembling violently. "Turn this off right now." I ignored her completely, keeping my eyes locked on Brad as he watched his entire criminal enterprise exposed in high definition. The trailer reached its devastating climax. My recorded voiceover returned slicing through the heavy, suffocating air of the sealed office. But where exactly did all this stolen generational wealth go? It did not go into community development. It funded the lavish, pathetic lifestyle of a socialite who hates her own people. The screen split into two distinct panels. On the left side, a scanned bank ledger showed a stolen equity payout from a foreclosed property owned by an 80-year-old grandmother. On the right side, the screen displayed a bright, colorful screenshot of Jasmine's social media account. It was the exact video she had posted 24 hours ago showing off her $40,000 diamond tennis bracelet in the airport lounge. The numbers on the bank ledger matched the jewelry receipt perfectly. The screen split again. Another stolen home equity transfer flashed on the left. On the right, a copy of the direct wire transfer paying for the exclusive overwater bungalow in the Maldives appeared. The digital paper trail was absolutely flawless, connecting every single designer bag, every luxury vehicle, and every elite vacation directly to the stolen blood money of our exploited community. The screen faded to black, leaving only a stark, bold title card that read, "The White Savior Syndrome," premiering soon. The heavy bass note faded out, plunging the opaque office into a profound, ringing silence. I pressed the remote control again, bringing the normal overhead lights back on. The harsh illumination revealed the total, catastrophic devastation of the Vance family facade. Brad looked as though he was going to vomit right on my hardwood floor. His breathing was shallow and rapid, his eyes darting wildly around the locked room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. Marcus and Helena stood completely paralyzed by the horrific revelation playing out before them. The overwhelming illusion of their perfect, wealthy white son-in-law had crumbled instantly into a pile of toxic criminal ashes. The very man they had worshipped, the man they had maliciously chosen over their own black daughter, was nothing but a ruthless con artist who had funded their elite status by destroying the lives of their own people. The absolute horror finally dawning in their eyes was the single most satisfying payoff I could have ever imagined. I watched them break, knowing they could never rebuild this broken, shattered empire. The suffocating silence inside the opaque glass walls shattered instantly. The terrifying reality of the high-definition evidence playing on the massive screen broke Marcus. For his entire life, he had crafted a public image built on the absolute illusion of prestige, wealth, and moral superiority. He had discarded his own daughter to fiercely protect that fragile facade. Now he was trapped in a soundproof room, staring at undeniable proof that his beloved son-in-law was a common thief. Marcus let out a guttural shout that tore violently through the sterile office air. He lunged blindly across the hardwood floor, completely abandoning his highly polished corporate persona. His expensive watch scraped against the glass table, but he did not care. He aggressively grabbed Brad by the collar of his custom-tailored shirt, twisting the soft fabric tightly in his violently shaking fists. The sudden explosive violence startled everyone. "Is this true?" Marcus screamed, his voice cracking with a terrifying mixture of raw rage and profound panic. He shook the younger man violently, practically lifting him off the tips of his expensive designer loafers. "Tell me the absolute truth right now, Brad. Did you actually fund my daughter's luxury lifestyle with stolen money? Have you been maliciously dragging my family name through the mud with a predatory Ponzi scheme?" Brad did not cower in fear. The desperate, cornered finance broker dropped his polite, respectful son-in-law routine. His face twisted into a vicious, ugly, and utterly arrogant sneer. He raised both of his hands and violently shoved Marcus backward with tremendous force. The forceful push sent the older man stumbling awkwardly across the room, his arms flailing desperately for balance, before crashing heavily into the edge of the glass conference table. He groaned in pain, clutching his bruised ribs. Mrs. Sarah gasped loudly, instinctively, stepping safely behind Mr. David as the severe physical altercation rapidly escalated right before our eyes. Mr. David stood firm, his broad shoulders squared fiercely, ready to protect me from the ensuing chaos if necessary. "Oh, shut up, Marcus!" Brad spat viciously, pointing a highly threatening finger directly at my father. "Do not stand there and try to play the innocent, righteous victim. You absolutely loved my money. You loved showing me off to all your wealthy friends at the elite country club. You practically salivated every single time I paid for a lavish dinner with my unlimited black card." Brad laughed, a harsh, maniacal sound that echoed disturbingly off the opaque glass walls. You are just as guilty as I am, old man. You are a senior partner on the executive board of my real estate firm. You happily signed those binding legal documents and eagerly cashed those massive dividend checks without ever asking a single question about where the massive profits were actually coming from. You completely turned a blind eye to my predatory business practices. As long as the bank transfers successfully cleared and your precious social status was properly funded, you enthusiastically sold your soul for a highly coveted seat at my table. Now, nee. The devastating accusation hit Marcus like a brutal physical blow to the chest. The dark color drained entirely from his face as he slowly realized the sheer magnitude of his severe legal exposure. He was legally and financially tethered to a massive federal crime. Jasmine suddenly began to hyperventilate. She collapsed onto her knees right in the middle of my production office, clutching her pregnant stomach and gasping desperately for air. The terrifying reality of her dire situation was finally crashing down heavily on her pampered shoulders. She was legally married to a federal criminal. Her entire socialite existence, built entirely on stolen funds and fake luxury, was officially over forever. There would be absolutely no more sponsored social media posts, no more exclusive baby moons, and no more diamond tennis bracelets. Mom, you have to fix this right now, Jasmine wailed, looking up at Helena with frantic, totally terrified eyes. You have to call the expensive lawyers and make this nightmare go away. I cannot be publicly married to a felon. I will be the absolute laughingstock of Atlanta society. I am carrying a baby. My entire digital brand is going to be completely destroyed. Please do not let them take my beautiful house away. Helena did not move a single inch. She stood completely paralyzed, staring blankly at the dark screen, her perfectly manicured hands trembling wildly at her sides. She had absolutely no powerful lawyers left to call. Her prestigious country club membership was permanently revoked. Her high-limit credit cards were entirely maxed out from the humiliating, miserable economy flight home. She had absolutely no social power or financial leverage left to fiercely wield against anyone. The brutal truth had permanently shattered her fragile reality. I silently watched their entire family unit violently cannibalize itself in real time. The unbreakable loyal bond they always proudly bragged about was nothing more than a highly fragile financial transaction, completely disintegrating the very second the money stopped effortlessly flowing. I did not feel a single ounce of pity for any of them. They had confidently built their entire superficial world on a deep foundation of lies, cruelty, and blatant exploitation. The inevitable, tragic collapse of their empire was spectacularly brutal and deeply satisfying to witness. They were finally reaping the devastating harvest they had so arrogantly sown for decades. I calmly reached out and picked up the sleek black remote control resting near the edge of my polished desk. I firmly pressed the pause button, freezing the devastating documentary trailer on a stark, undeniable high-definition image of Brad's forged corporate signature. The sudden digital pause commanded the immediate fearful attention of the entire room. The frantic screaming, crying, and heavy breathing abruptly halted as the four of them slowly turned their terrified faces back toward my desk. I have a major meeting to greenlight this sequel, but the ending lacks a little bit of dramatic physical action. I slowly stood up from my leather chair, leaving the paused documentary trailer glowing brightly on the massive screen behind me. The silence in my office was heavy thick with the undeniable reality of their complete destruction. I walked around the edge of my polished wooden desk, my footsteps sounding deliberately slow against the hardwood floor. Marcus, Helena, Jasmine, and Brad watched my every move with wide, terrified eyes. They looked like cornered prey, finally realizing there was absolutely no escape from the trap I had meticulously set. I walked straight toward the opaque glass wall that separated my private production suite from the stunning view of the Midtown Atlanta skyline. I held the sleek black remote control in my right hand. I pressed the third button on the device. A sharp electronic beep echoed through the room. The smart glass instantly cleared, shifting from a milky, solid white to perfectly transparent crystal. The bright afternoon sunlight flooded back into the office, washing over their pale, horrified faces. I stepped right up to the glass and pointed my index finger straight down toward the busy street sitting 30 stories below us. "Come take a look at your real legacy, Marcus," I demanded, my voice projecting absolute authority. My father hesitated, his chest heaving with panicked breaths, but the sheer gravity of my command pulled him forward. He stumbled blindly toward the window, leaning his shaking hands against the thick glass to look down at the street. Helena and Jasmine cautiously followed him, their faces pressed tightly against the transparent wall. Brad remained frozen near my desk, too terrified to move a single inch. Mr. David and Mrs. Sarah remained calmly seated at the conference table, watching the arrogant family unravel with quiet, dignified satisfaction. Down on the bustling Atlanta street, normal traffic had been completely halted. 3 massive matte black FBI tactical sport utility vehicles were parked aggressively at slanted angles directly in front of the main entrance to my commercial building. Right behind them, half a dozen Atlanta Police Department cruisers blocked the entire intersection, trapping any possible escape route. The flashing red and blue emergency lights spun wildly, casting a chaotic, violent glow against the concrete sidewalks and nearby glass storefronts. Uniformed police officers were aggressively pushing back a growing crowd of curious pedestrians, securing a hard tactical perimeter around the foundation of the corporate tower. Heavily armed federal agents were already pouring out of the black vehicles, moving with terrifying speed and absolute precision toward the main lobby doors. Helena let out a loud, piercing shriek that rattled the glass walls of my office. She stumbled backward away from the window, her manicured hands covering her face in absolute, unadulterated terror. "They are here for us," Helena cried out, her voice trembling violently. "Marcus, the federal agents are literally parked outside the building. They are going to publicly arrest us in front of the entire city. My friends will see this on the evening news." Jasmine sank heavily to the floor, weeping hysterically into her hands. Her carefully crafted socialite facade was permanently dead. She was about to become the publicly disgraced wife of a convicted felon. She would never recover her fake status. I turned away from the window and walked back toward the center of the office. I stopped directly in front of Brad. The arrogant, wealthy white finance broker who had maliciously thrown a $100 bill at my feet was now physically shaking. Heavy beads of cold sweat rolled down his pale forehead, soaking the collar of his expensive custom shirt. He looked incredibly small, pathetic, and entirely defeated. I looked him dead in the eyes, allowing a cold, victorious smile to form on my lips. "Brad, you told me to take an Uber," I said, my voice ringing out sharp and clear. "I think you should take the squad car. I sent all of those encrypted financial files to the federal authorities while you were flying coach over the Atlantic Ocean." See? Brad let out a ragged, desperate gasp. The devastating reality of his situation finally crushed him. He had no powerful corporate lawyers left to call. His offshore bank accounts were completely frozen by federal regulators. The government had absolute, undeniable proof of his predatory Ponzi scheme, and his vulnerable victims were finally going to get their stolen homes back. He aggressively looked around my spacious production office, his bloodshot eyes darting wildly like a trapped rat looking for any possible exit. He realized that his fake empire, built entirely on the exploitation of my community, was officially terminated. There was no remaining loophole, no wealthy benefactor, and no dark money to bail him out. He was completely out of options. Before Brad could formulate a coherent thought, a new sound pierced the heavy tension inside the room. Through the heavy wooden doors of my office, a loud rhythmic thud echoed down the polished corporate hallway. It was the distinct, terrifying sound of heavy tactical boots marching in perfect unison. The federal agents had bypassed the lobby security desk and were currently moving rapidly down the corridor, heading straight toward my production suite. The rhythmic thumping grew louder and faster with every passing second, sending a fresh wave of blinding panic through my biological family. Brad's eyes went incredibly wide. Pure, unadulterated panic completely took over his body. He lunged away from my desk, aggressively shoving his pregnant wife aside and made a desperate, pathetic sprint toward the emergency fire exit located at the very back of my suite. He grabbed the metal handle and violently rattled it, but the thick door refused to open. I had already secured the secondary perimeter directly from my master desk console. There was absolutely nowhere left for him to run. He slowly turned around, his chest heaving rapidly, his face twisted in pure, inescapable horror. The heavy wooden doors to my main office suddenly burst wide open, swinging violently backward on their heavy metal hinges. A dozen federal agents stormed into my production suite, moving with terrifying speed and overwhelming tactical precision. They wore dark bulletproof vests emblazoned with bold yellow letters, carrying heavy firearms, and shouting strict, deafening commands that completely shattered the final remnants of the Vance family facade. Two agents immediately bypassed my desk, aggressively targeting the panicking white finance broker who was still desperately clutching the locked handle of the emergency fire exit. Brad let out a pathetic, high-pitched shriek as the agents violently grabbed his custom-tailored suit jacket. They forcefully spun him around and slammed his body hard against the thick, transparent glass wall of my office. The heavy impact reverberated through the room, leaving a noticeable smudge of terrified sweat against the pristine window. A tall, imposing agent aggressively kicked Brad's legs apart, patting him down for weapons, before swiftly wrenching his arms behind his back. The distinct metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs locking securely around his wrists sounded like absolute music to my ears. Bradley Miller, you are officially under arrest for multiple federal counts of wire fraud, massive corporate embezzlement, and orchestrating an interstate racketeering scheme. The lead agent announced, his voice projecting absolute, uncompromising authority. You have the right to remain completely silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a federal court of law. You have the right to speak to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Brad squeezed his eyes shut, hyperventilating, as the cold, hard reality of his ruined life completely crushed him. Jasmine let out a blood-curdling, hysterical scream that pierced the tense air of the corporate office. She lunged blindly across the hardwood floor, completely ignoring the federal agents, and desperately threw her arms around her disgraced husband's neck. She clung to him like a drowning victim, sobbing uncontrollably into the expensive fabric of his ruined shirt. You cannot take him away right now, Jasmine wailed frantically, her designer makeup running down her face in dark, ugly streaks. He is an elite finance executive. We are having a baby. You are making a massive mistake. A female federal agent immediately stepped forward, grabbing Jasmine firmly by the shoulders and aggressively pushing her backward, completely separating her from the handcuffed criminal. Ma'am, you need to step back immediately and cease interfering with a highly active federal investigation, or you will be arrested for obstruction of justice today, the female agent commanded strictly. Jasmine stumbled backward, collapsing into Helena's trembling arms. My mother wrapped her shaking hands around her weeping daughter, desperately trying to salvage some pathetic shred of their ruined social dignity. Marcus, completely unable to comprehend his total loss of control, puffed out his chest in a desperate final attempt to utilize his imaginary upper-class authority. He aggressively marched right up to the lead federal agent, puffing himself up to his full height. Do you have any idea who you are dealing with today? Marcus demanded, his voice shaking with a pathetic mixture of arrogant rage and profound terror. I am Marcus Vance. I am a prominent, highly respected figure in Atlanta society. I play golf with judges and politicians. You cannot simply barge into a commercial building and arrest my son-in-law like a common street thug. I demand to speak to your superior officer right this second. The lead federal agent did not flinch. He did not look intimidated by the arrogant demands of a disgraced country club socialite. Instead, he looked at Marcus with a profound, undeniable expression of absolute disgust. He slowly reached into the tactical pouch on his dark vest and pulled out a thick stack of folded legal warrants. Sir, I do not care who you play golf with on the weekends, the agent stated coldly, unfolding the top document and holding it directly in front of my father's pale face. Your specific signature is listed on the executive board of directors for 3 different fraudulent shell companies connected to this massive predatory housing scam. Your corporate title was actively used to legitimize the theft of millions of dollars from vulnerable senior citizens across this entire state. We have full authorization to secure your compliance. Marcus stared blankly at the federal warrant, the color draining completely from his face. The overwhelming weight of his severe legal exposure hit him like a violent physical blow. You are coming into the downtown field office for extensive federal questioning right now, Mr. Vance. The agent continued relentlessly. 2 more armed agents immediately stepped forward, firmly grabbing Marcus by both of his arms. They aggressively pulled his hands behind his back, securing another heavy pair of steel handcuffs around his wrists. The metallic click echoed loudly through my office, officially terminating the fake empire of the Vance family. Helena screamed, clutching her chest as her husband was violently restrained. Marcus struggled awkwardly against the agents, his pristine corporate image permanently destroyed. As the federal agents began to forcefully march him toward the heavy wooden double doors, Marcus twisted his head around. He looked directly at me, his eyes wide with pleading, absolute terror. He was no longer the arrogant patriarch demanding total subservience. He was a desperate, broken man begging for a miracle. Simone, please tell them, Marcus cried out, his voice cracking with pathetic desperation. Tell them I did not know anything about the stolen money. Tell them Brad lied to me. Please, Simone, you have to help your father. I remained seated in my leather chair, observing his total destruction with zero empathy. I did not feel a single ounce of sorrow for the man who had gleefully evicted his own black daughter to fund a fake, fraudulent life. I leaned forward, resting my hands on my desk. Grow up, Marcus, I replied, my voice slicing through the chaotic room with cold, lethal precision. Actions have consequences. The federal agents dragged Marcus and Brad out of my pristine production office, their desperate protests muffled by the heavy glass doors swinging shut. Jasmine and Helena followed closely behind them, sobbing hysterically as they were escorted out of the commercial building by armed security guards. I walked over to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the busy street. The flashing red and blue lights of the federal vehicles painted the midtown skyline as they hauled my brother-in-law and my father away in handcuffs. I stood in my pristine suite, breathing in the quiet, undisturbed peace of total victory. The toxic weight that had suffocated me for 33 years was finally gone, leaving me free. Exactly 2 weeks later, the spectacular fallout hit every single news network in Atlanta. The headlines were merciless and absolutely relentless. Local television stations and national media outlets eagerly broadcasted the staggering details of how a prominent real estate firm had systematically defrauded elderly Black homeowners to fund a lavish fake lifestyle. The Vance family name, once a highly coveted golden ticket in high society, was now entirely synonymous with ruthless corruption and profound betrayal. They had built a massive house of cards, and I had simply provided the match to burn it down. Helena experienced the swiftest, most brutal social execution in the history of the city. Patricia, the president of the elite country club, did not just quietly revoke her membership. She had armed security guards publicly escort Helena off the manicured golf course during a crowded Sunday brunch. The wealthy upper-class women, who used to sip expensive champagne with my mother, now actively crossed the street to avoid making eye contact with her. Helena was permanently exiled from the glamorous world she had worshipped, left to wander through her sprawling, empty estate as the federal banks aggressively prepared to seize the heavily mortgaged property. Her pristine illusion of ultimate superiority was forever broken. Jasmine suffered an equally devastating collapse. Her digital empire dissolved completely overnight. Millions of internet followers turned on her with vicious speed, flooding her social media pages with intense, righteous anger. Every single corporate sponsor, high-end makeup brand, and designer clothing boutique permanently dropped her within hours of Brad's highly publicized arrest. The bank swiftly foreclosed on her massive suburban mansion, forcing the spoiled socialite to pack her remaining belongings into cheap garbage bags. She had to move into a tiny, dilapidated one-bedroom apartment on the extreme outskirts of Atlanta. She spent her days crying on a thin, secondhand mattress, desperately pawning her diamond tennis bracelets and custom designer bags just to afford the astronomical retainer fees for Brad's criminal defense attorney. She was finally living the exact struggling artist phase she had previously mocked me for enduring, but she possessed absolutely none of the resilience required to actually survive it. Her fake luxury was gone. Marcus faced relentless legal and financial annihilation. Federal investigators froze every single domestic and offshore account tied to his name, systematically dismantling his fake corporate facade piece by piece. His arrogant, polished image was entirely destroyed. He spent his days sitting in sterile, windowless interrogation rooms, sweating profusely in cheap, wrinkled clothing, while desperately trying to negotiate a lenient plea deal with ruthless federal prosecutors. The powerful corporate executives who used to play golf with him actively pretended he did not exist, completely blacklisting him from the Atlanta business community. He was facing total bankruptcy, severe public disgrace, and potential prison time. He was entirely isolated, stripped of the unearned power he had so gleefully wielded against his own flesh and blood. The reality of his catastrophic failure crushed his spirit entirely. I sat in my spacious, sunlit office, watching the relentless news coverage play quietly on my computer monitor. They were currently living the exact same desperate, impoverished life they used to maliciously mock me for enduring. They had proudly told me that true artists needed to struggle aggressively, locking me out of my apartment to fund a luxury island vacation. Now they did not have a single safety net to catch them because they had maliciously burned their only bridge to ashes. They had ruthlessly traded their own daughter for a seat at a table that was actively designed to destroy them. The poetic justice was incredibly absolute and deeply satisfying to witness from afar. I felt absolutely no guilt watching them fall. I reached for my warm coffee mug, taking a slow, peaceful sip, when my smartphone suddenly lit up brightly on my desk. The caller identification displayed a restricted, unknown number. I did not pick it up. I let it ring continuously until the call finally went straight to my highly secure voicemail box. A few short seconds later, a sharp audio notification chimed loudly. I tapped the smooth glass screen and pressed play on the newly recorded message. The desperate, trembling voice of Helena filled the quiet production office. "Simone, please pick up the phone right now." Helena sobbed, her voice completely stripped of its usual arrogant superiority. "We have absolutely nothing left. The federal banks are officially seizing our primary estate tomorrow morning. We are going to be completely homeless, Simone. Please, I know you still have the Vanguard money sitting securely in your corporate accounts. You are our daughter. We desperately need a substantial loan to save our house and pay the lawyers. I am begging you to please help us right now." I listened to her pathetic weeping pleas without feeling a single ounce of sorrow, pity, or lingering familial obligation. I did not owe them salvation or grace. They had made their malicious choices with absolute, undeniable clarity, and now they were finally paying the ultimate devastating price for their profound greed. I tapped the bright red trash can icon on my screen, permanently deleting the frantic voicemail forever. I placed the heavy phone down on my polished wooden desk, crossed my arms, and smiled quietly to myself. The peaceful silence in my office was truly beautiful and absolute. They were finally gone,